Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. If you are looking for vendor process training for you or your entire vendor team, head over to my site at deborahrrichardson.com and click on the Vendor Team Training Solved button to learn more about what is included in the annual plan and also to download a training schedule. Get the training that you and your team needs to avoid payment fraud, duplicate vendors, compliance fines, and more. As a result of the Russian invasion against Ukraine, the U.S. Department of Treasury has issued new OFAC sanctions targeting Russia. What does that mean for the vendor team, and what are ways to comply? Keep listening. Welcome to episode 179, The Russian Invasion Against Ukraine, One Critical Effect on the Vendor Team. So before I really get started, for those of you that are not familiar with OFAC, OFAC stands for the Office of Foreign Assets and Control, and it has several sanctions lists that contains names of individuals, banks, businesses that have been blocked from doing business in the U.S. Now, the U.S. government prohibits U.S. citizens and U.S.-based entities and U.S. branches of foreign companies from doing business with parties on these sanctions lists. Compliance with these OFAC regulations is required, and failure to comply can result in both civil and criminal penalties that can exceed $7 million. Now, the U.S. Treasury or U.S. Department of Treasury maintains this OFAC list. So why this is important and why it's important to the vendor team is that according to the U.S. Department of Treasury, they posted an article on their site on March 11th, 2022, and it says, and I quote, "Today, the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets and Control issued a new round of sanctions targeting Russian and Kremlin elites, oligarchs, and Russian political and national security leaders who have supported Russian President Vladimir Putin's brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine." Now, again, what does that mean for accounts payable, procurement teams, or maybe a master data governance team, whoever has the responsibility for managing the vendor master file? Well, I'll tell you what it means. It means that those lists that you're checking your vendors against have changed. They have increased. So normally during vendor setup, you should already be performing the OFAC check to ensure that your vendor does not appear on any of those sanctions lists. Also, their banks. That's great, but once you get them in your vendor master file, you still need to monitor it to verify that they have not subsequently been added to one of those sanctions lists since you originally onboarded them. So on a regular basis, but especially now, monitoring your existing vendors is definitely required. And so that's the big thing for vendor teams is you need to make sure that you go back and you, one, recheck all of your existing vendors now based on the fact that they have the U.S. Department of Treasury has added vendors to their block list, and two, put a process in place so that you are consistently checking your vendors against those OFAC sanction lists. All right, so now that we've established that you need to be checking your vendors and your vendors' bank names against these OFAC sanction lists at the time of setup, and then also consistently once they are existing vendors in your vendor master file, let's talk about 3 ways that you can do these OFAC checks. So the first way is on the U.S. Department of Treasury's site, or the OFAC site itself. You can manually search your vendors and your vendor's legal name and your vendor's bank name on that OFAC site. OFAC maintains full sanction lists and also publishes updates to those lists. Both the full list and the list of changes are available for download in PDF and text formats. Now, you can even request to sign up for the email subscription service so that you are notified of changes. And I'll put the link to that page in the show notes, along with the link to an RSS feed that they have available as well, that is updated whenever the OFAC site is updated or whenever those lists are updated. So you can go directly onto the U.S. Department of Treasury OFAC site and do that check. So that was the first way. The second way is 10check.com. So if you are already using 10check.com for your IRS 10 matching, you probably already know that the service also checks the OFAC sanction list. Monthly or more, you can use their bulk option to revalidate against those lists. Now, when you use the bulk option, you don't have to put the vendor's tax ID. You could just use 9 zeros for the tax ID and just upload. Now, the good news is that it will do the validation for you, that rechecking against the updated OFAC sanction list as a bulk upload. So if you are currently doing that OFAC check one by one, and you want to combine that OFAC check with the IRS 10 match and some other features and checks that 10check.com provides, this might be an excellent time to ask for that subscription. I know it costs, but if you are currently doing a manual OFAC check, look up on the OFAC site or another site. It might be time now to go back and ask for 10check or another type of software that allows you to do that bulk watch list validation. So might be time for that business case. You can go to, and I'll put the link in the description, to 10check.com and check out the prices. You do, though, once you get it, or if you already have it, the bulk function is a tab on the menu. And if you don't have it, it's because you do need to contact them to turn that function on. Otherwise, you won't see it as a tab option. So either way, if you don't have 10check.com, or if you don't have that bulk upload feature, contact them and check out prices. I bet if you did a business case against the manual time and the labor it took you or a team member to do those checks, and as frequently now as I am saying you need to do it, I bet your business case will get an approval. All right, so that was number 2, or the second way you can monitor your existing active vendors, is to use 10check.com or a similar piece of software that will allow you to do bulk uploads. All right, so the last one, number 3, is continuous monitoring software. Now, this can be via a vendor self-registration portal. It could be your vendor risk screening process or a separate compliance service. Since the functions of the self-registration, vendor portals, and screening services can vary, you need to verify with your third-party provider that this function is even available and turned on. Maybe it's available and you're not sure, you didn't know it, so contact them. Maybe they can turn that on. This is probably the most expensive route to take, but again, not when compared with the potential penalties for non-compliance. And if you remember earlier, I indicated that those civil and criminal penalties can be several $1 million as a result of paying a vendor that is on one of those lists. So with all three of these, either manually on the OFAC site or a bulk upload on 10check.com or a similar piece of software, or continuous monitoring in your vendor self-registration portal, for example, you should be able to verify that your new vendors and their banks are not on any of these OFAC sanction lists. And more importantly, make sure you have a process in place to ensure that your existing vendors have not been subsequently added to any of the OFAC sanction lists. And to verify that and make sure you stay on top of it, I would check at least monthly. Now, if you can check prior to each pay cycle, that would be ideal. But if you have too many pay cycles, I would say that continuous monitoring software is starting to look pretty good. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 179th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.